Leadership today is filled with pressure, uncertainty, and constant change. In this episode of The Next Interview, Russell Harvey, known as the Resilience Coach, joins our host Doland White for a powerful conversation about resilient leadership, VUCA environments, trust, and why the best leaders don't just survive pressure. They actually grow through it.
Most leaders are working harder than they need to, and they're getting less done than they should. And this is because decisions, accountability, execution still all have to run through them. That's not sustainable, and it's certainly not necessary. In Lead with Confidence, I break down how to create a team that moves without waiting for you. If that matters, grab your copy. The link's in the show notes. Now let's get to the podcast episode. Welcome to the Next Interview Show podcast. I'm Doland White, as Liam, the announcer, mentioned, coming through that front door. And I know listeners, you hear me say this every week. I am blessed to host a podcast where I get to talk with some brilliant individuals, and we talk about leadership. We focus in on the nuances of leadership. And today, by far, is no exception to that. I have Russell Harvey on with me today, and we're going to spend some time talking about one of my favorite topics, which is resilience. And I actually learned a new term prepping for this podcast. So I learned a new acronym. So we're going to talk about the acronym VUCA, which you talk about. And but before we get going, I want to introduce you, and I'm going to read your bio. This is the only time I read. And I love the start of your bio. Russell Harvey, the resilience coach. I'm the empowerment guy. So I smiled when I saw that and said, yeah, this is going to be cool. Is a dynamic and engaging leadership coach and facilitator, public speaker, managing director, podcaster, and a radio host. I don't know if you knew all those things about you, but you are all those things.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Pretty much. And then with over 20 years experience in learning leadership and organizational development, you're passionate about positively affecting. And we started with a number this morning. I think the number shifted 100,000 people as in your career. And you've already impacted. I love this. The fact that there was a number in your information is probably even more, that you've already impacted 78,102. That's specific.
Yes. And now, the 100,000 is hit. So we will come to that essentially.
Great.
Yes, absolutely.
And listeners, I'll apologize, listeners, if you hear me coughing. I'm just coming over a little bit of bronchitis, but I'm here. I got my coffee, and we're in. So before we get going, I just wanted to there's 1,000 other places. It's 5 p.m. for you in the UK where you are, and I'm between you and the pint. So I want to just take a moment and tell you thank you for coming in and hanging out with me and having a conversation, sharing your insights. In particular today, talking about resilience. That's a really important topic. So grateful that you're here. Yeah. Thanks, Russell.
Really appreciate you having me on, Dolan. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Yes, and I love talking about this word resilience. There is occasionally in the last few years when somebody's mentioned it and I've gone, oh, for goodness sake, can we just talk about something else? However, 99.9% of the time, I love talking about the word, essentially, and what it means. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Good. We'll live in the 99 point. We'll live in that percentage too, right? It's better than the 80-20 Pareto principle, but we'll stay in the 99.
Yes.
There. So, and again, apologies. So I want to start, since the listeners haven't met you, there's always a journey that gets us to kind of where we are and why we do what we do, right? Especially when we develop a passion to go help other leaders and in particularly help them live better lives. So I want to just maybe take the first couple of minutes and whatever time we need and just talk about your journey and your background and what brought you to and what you're doing today. Because I love having been a CEO, COO, there's lots of domains of pressure we'll talk about. And resilience, I think, is a huge needed topic from a leadership perspective. So let's start with kind of your path, and then I got one opening question, and after that, I'll throw the piece of paper away.
That's perfect. Yeah. So thank you so much, Dolan. So I've always known since I was a child that I was interested in human behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that I'm a looker afterer as well as a person. So growing up school and sort of career conversations, people would sort of say, "Oh, Russell, you're good with people. You'll be good in sales or personnel." And
Oh, wow.
both of those words at that time made me feel a bit ick,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
No thanks. But hang on to that because, they weren't
Sure.
necessarily wrong, essentially. But then the next milestone was 1996 teaching in Hong Kong as part of a round the world trip. There
Wow.
was some magic that was happening in the room, and I went, I want to do this for a living. I don't know what this is. There's something gorgeous is happening, and I'm doing this for a living. And I knew I didn't want to be a teacher in a school. My lovely wife's a teacher, but I knew that environment was what I wanted. So came back from traveling, went to recruitment agencies, and said, I think I want to be a business trainer. That was the job title that I could describe. And they asked,
Yeah.
what do you know? What you qualified in? And I was like, well, nothing. And now, I know. Yeah. So the magic is people learning, essentially, people having light bulb moments. So leaders going from confused face or goodness gracious, Russell, why is it so blooming tough,
Right.
to go to, aha, I can see a different way, So that really floated my boat. And so as a result of that, a career in learning and development was born. And the milestone was the last permanent role I had at the Co-op Group. And not long after joining, got into a real pickle. So the world fell on everybody's heads, essentially.
Yeah.
And I was supporting like the top 300 leaders around just their development, a whole team of others. And people come to me with their head in their hands. And I said, right, there's this word resilience, and it's an acronym of VUCA. And our solutions are in there. And when I left the Co-op, which would have been my 6th redundancy,
Right.
I created the resilience gauge. And so the 100,000, one of the dimensions of being resilient is having a purpose.
Yes.
So for a long time, I'd say it was like my purpose positively affect 100,000. August 2025, that was completed. So now the purpose is championing businesses to be a force for good, which is all about what it means to be a resilient leader. So the resilient leader creates the environment where people can thrive and be as well as they can be in a mad bonkers crazy world. So that's the snapshot of my journey.
I love that journey. I smiled as you were talking about part of it, having similar paths, just very similar paths. So it should have been there for a pint. Let's just call it that. Would have restructured the whole conversation. And listeners, we've Russell and I threatened to start a podcast. It's Leadership in Beer. There you go. And I think there's a winning title in there somewhere.
There really is. Yes.
But it's funny because it's similarly there was a point in my career I spent a lot of time in the software industry leading teams and got to travel. When I was teaching all over the world, 14, 15 countries, this thing I called professionalism, which was, how do you behave and how do you talk? And just kind of fell in love with all that. Never didn't really delve off into it until I retired, which is, now that I'm old, I can go do that stuff and not worry about it. But I love the path, because it is, I think one of the things that's really important about what you talked about is that through line. There was you mentioned as a child for people to go, well, you're a caring person, therefore you should probably be in HR. You should probably go hire people, and we have that.
So I am in HR because I'm in learning and development, essentially.
Yeah.
And I have to sell myself, essentially. So yes, the sales and the personnel, they're not wrong. It was there, essentially. But I still don't think of it that way, even though that's what I'm doing.
It's funny though, but I think it's as you mentioned that, I think everybody at some point in their career should do one of two jobs, either be a dishwasher or be a salesperson. Because if there's a rule behind those, if you're not humble, you're about to be humbled. But I love that, because I think there is that HR and sales component to what you do. But I think probably the difference is it's wrapped in a different intention.
Yeah.
The intention is how do I help you create that life? I love the statement around your mission and what you're focused on. and what your intention really is. That's
And the big part of that is it was a few years ago. So the last two or three World Happiness Reports,
yeah,
there was just a mention in there that, so when you ask a human being that's got a job,
yeah,
how are you? There's something. It's not an exact number, but if yourself and listeners are okay for now, about 70% of our ability to give a decent answer to the question of how are you is down to our relationship with our line manager, our boss, our
mm-hmm,
leader.
mm-hmm,
So, in terms of championing businesses to be a force for good, is to go, right, the resilient leader has sorted themselves out
right,
so that they can actually lead and build and grow a richer and resilient team.
yeah,
And the outcome of all of those is that when you say to somebody, how are you? The resilient leader individual gives the answer of, do you know what? There's a lot going on and I'm good. Whereas prior to that, you might say,
yeah,
how are you? They give some variation of like, well, I'm all right if it wasn't for,
yeah,
or, dot, dot, dot.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the flip side, And
It
so
is.
there's the difference between the surviving and coping and the thriving piece, which is, resiliency language, essentially.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that because I think one of the things as a leader, if you are if you're really paying attention to your team
Yeah.
and you're really listening to what they're talking about, I know as CEO, a lot of things I would watch for. I'm watching and listening for the things you just talked about, Russell, which is that first internal breath. So how are you doing? And you meet people most, if you happen to be in an office, a lot of it's done over Zoom these days, but
Yes.
which
Yes.
makes it even more challenging. But it is that opportunity, I think. And you hit on something that's really cool, which is it's that, well, it's that breath. And then, well, okay.
Yeah.
So you're not all right.
No. And I am really curious about potentially, some of the cultural differences. So even, USA and UK. So
Yeah.
sweeping generalization, USA are more than likely to go, I'm great,
Yes.
as a
Oh yeah.
stereotype. Yes. So then it's interesting to pick behind that. And the UK is a lot more on the complaining side, essentially.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
and there are obviously Asian cultures as well, and so there's all sorts of different things. So, globally, asking people how are you has got some cultural nuances to it as well, which is also interesting.
Yeah. I think that's really important, especially now, because at one point in my career and probably, in the body of your career, if we were going to go work with a client, I had to get on a plane and I was
Yes.
going to go for a long time. And now I get to work all over the world. The day I was blessed, I started in Uganda and ended up in Bahrain by the end of the day. And 6 different cultures, 6 different conversations, and had a blast. But to your point that there is that cultural nuance that goes into kind of discovering that. I'm gonna come back to that because I wrote that down. I
Mm,
wrote it right here. I'm
mm.
gonna come back to it. So I'm really kind of curious. Um, when you were working, creating resiliency inside of the body of an organization, has to be based on authenticity, right? And you can't fake authenticity. You could try, but
Yeah.
we can smell it, right? When it doesn't, there's an odor that comes with that. And you're working with leaders. So I'm throwing away all the questions I had prepared.
That's
So
quite all right.
when we when you're working with when you're working with leaders, that that resiliency has to permeate an entire organization.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
just I'm going to fix you and then God will take care of the rest.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
No.
Uh, so I'm kind of curious when you're a couple things. Let me give you 2 questions, and then you pick the order you want to answer them.
Okay.
When you're working with a leader, and that leader is obviously stressed, right? There's a resilience challenge going on because that's a component I think that a lot of leaders just accept. I'm a CEO or a VP, and therefore I must be stressed, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm not successful. Um, how do you maybe this is a pivot into VUCA, right? How do you kind of help them start to unpack that that stress and move to resiliency? That it's okay. That there's a
Yeah.
reason. There's something you can take out of that stress and make it good.
So there's a few different routes in, as you know, this as a coach. You just start to ask questions and start to tease things out and just see what lands. So quite often I do a psychometric called Strength Scope, which I think in the USA might be familiar with Strength Finder.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
so sometimes that's the route in for them to understand about this word energy, but not in a soft and fluffy way, in an actually a real way of like, tell me about your week that's coming up or the week that you've had.
Okay.
Where were you energized and where were you like, no thanks, I'm just, God, no way, don't want to do this,
Yeah.
And so those will help sometimes have the language around stress, because part of it is about whether the leader is what they're comfortable with around this stress language and whether they're seeing any of it as a negativity bias. So sometimes it's that. Then, sometimes we talk about, good stress and bad stress, and, that might helpful. Yeah. And then my other routine is that I have this resilience framework, resilience wheel, which is the answer to the question, so Russell, how do I build my resilience? I go, right, there's a wheel, 7 aspects to it, built on loads of research, and you can apply it personally, leadership, teams, and organizationally.
Mhm.
So to start with, it can sometimes just be a conversation around the wheel. One of the dimensions of it is obviously is confidence, and your new book is all about lead with confidence. So if it's time
Shameless,
to
shameless plug. There we go. Plug alert. All right. Anyway, but yeah.
But I was like, yes, absolutely. So then we do essentially a bit of a conversational self-assessment, and we can do a diagnostic. But I'll go, okay, look, there's 7 aspects of somebody that's their resilience. So, just where are you self-assessing yourself right now? If you're going to score it out of 10. And then all of those, it gives us opportunities to start to tap into, okay, so what's overwhelming you? What changes are you okay with? And the backdrop of this is an acronym that you mentioned, which is the VUCA environment, essentially about change is constant. So people cognitively nod when you say change is constant.
Yeah.
And then the VUCA framework, I think, is a useful way to go, right, let's pull that apart, because there's a counterbalance to it, and there's peak performance skills, and there's leadership capabilities that enable you to face into a crazy world, and they all link to resilience. So it isn't necessarily a singular thing. It's just sort of go, what's your current answer to the question, how are you? Does that suddenly just make you stop?
Yes. Yeah.
Or does that just give you a verbal download? And a lot of the time it's a verbal download. And then partway through, people go, what was the question?
Right. Yes. Yeah. I understand that. Yeah. About an hour later, what were we talking about?
Yes.
I love that.
So
And I want listeners, as you listen, go back on your device, listeners. There's a button that you can press to go back. And I say this in podcasts all the time over key moments, but go back and listen to what Russell was just talking about. You said something really important, and I want to lean in just a strong tip of the hat to your approach. And it is that you talked about the wheel, the resilience wheel. You talked about VUCA. You talked about the conversation. But one thing you said that stitched it all together, at least for me, as I'm listening to you very intently, is the fact that it's not about it. It is about all of those things, and it is about the right piece of those things.
yes.
It is not, because I think a lot of times, and I work with, and you probably get these pings all the time with people that send you a message in LinkedIn, and the message is, hey, I have a methodology, and if I just come beat you with this methodology, my guarantee is I'm going to change your results. And the answer is yes, you will. They'll be bad.
Yeah.
So because you're going to hit me with something that may not be appropriate. So I love the approach of, I want to understand it before we take a spin around this resilience wheel. Let's understand where you are. which is, I think, critical, which in particularly with an emotional thing like resilience, that's important.
It really is. It really is. Because, that what does it mean to be resilient is also the same question of what does it really mean to be human.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so it's individual. So yes, we all do as coaches. I have a depth and a breadth of stuff
yes,
that I can tap into, and it's going right. Let's just start to tease out what's going on with you. And what I really try and drip feed to start with is how I like to frame resilience, which you've probably seen, is springing forward with learning. So I'm a bit like a sort
right.
of broken record to start with clients, to just sort of go, well, I really need you to start to cognitively and emotionally get that resilience is springing forward with learning. I'm
Yeah,
not a fan of the term bounce back. I just don't enjoy it because it's a subconscious instruction to face into an event, and then I'll now go back, bounce back to how I was before. And I'm going, what did you learn? What did you learn?
right.
Yeah,
I love that. I call it, yeah. A lot of times with clients, it's the gateway to yeah, but.
yeah,
Yeah, but, and that means we're going backwards, right? For those
yes,
watching the video, I'm leaning way back in my chair. Those listening, just imagine what's going on. So one thing, and I think it's very important. Such a good topic about springing forward with what you learn. The you know the other part about it, that the fact that you get that cognitive yes, the head shake around change is constant. There's going to be change. Matter of fact, that's the nature of business. If there's not change, your company is probably dying.
yes,
I
yes,
mean, it's just
absolutely.
that's a fact of life.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, and to start with, it's a lot of buzzwords around the VUCA piece. So it's like there's VUCA and VUCA Prime. It's not mine. It's been around for decades, or potentially, if you do some research on it, centuries.
yeah.
But I find that it is a useful framework to have a different conversation
Hmm.
about all of these words of change, flexibility, adaptability, agile, resilience. And I go, okay, all right, let's just stop for a second. And it's like, which one of those do you want me to be? Because you turn up to organization, you got to be this, you got to be that. And also, as well, my absolute intention around this is I don't want to go anywhere near a feeling of toxic resilience or toxic positivity. I want to steer clear of that, essentially.
So define those a little bit.
Yeah,
So yeah, explain that, because I think that's will be something really interesting to in the U.S. The
yeah.
phrase is over the top, right?
So what it looks like and sounds like and feels like is that if you or anybody else goes into your boss or a team meeting or a
Mhm.
conversation with a colleague and go, do you know what? I'm just not sure if we're taking the right approach here, or do you know what? I'm a little bit worried about some of the things that we're doing. If somebody comes along and literally does, you just need to be resilient, you just need to be positive, that is not what I want the world to be doing. And for those that weren't watching the video, I was doing finger pointing at at that moment in time, essentially.
Awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, and
Yeah,
because I think there's risks to both of those behaviors.
yeah.
You said something just in passing, Russell, and I wrote it down really just to if I could reread my handwriting as I'm going. But the difference between good and bad stress
Yeah.
really kind of, because I think a lot of leaders tend to think of stress as just it's just stress, right? This is and there's not a differentiating factor on. So what is this stress?
So if you think about, lots of these things are interconnected, Dolan. So it's like springing forward with learning is still this
Yep.
premise, yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you imagine, I know you'll have drawn this loads of times, three concentric circles, and you've got comfort, stretch, and panic.
Hmm.
Comfort in the middle, stretch. So good stress is stretching. So when I ask you to do something, and you sort of go, "Oh, yeah, that's cool. That's a bit challenging, a bit exciting, but I'm willing to give it a go."
Yeah.
Stretch. Panic is the bad stress, essentially, and part of it as well is what I encourage all my clients, anybody that's listening now, how you role model resilient leadership or resilient human is from all of life events, you pause. And pause is listening to a podcast. Pause is going for a walk. Pause is
Yeah.
a great team meeting, etc., etc., etc. But in those pauses, you need to be asking yourself 3 questions. What have I been doing behaviorally recently that has been serving me well against the resilience wheel?
Right.
What have I been doing behaviorally recently that's not been serving me well against the resilience wheel? And how do I do more of answers to the first question? So when
Right.
you are doing the behaviors that aren't serving you well, they're more than likely to go into unhelpful stress or unhelpful behaviors or stress triggers.
Right.
When you are doing the behaviors that are serving you well, it probably doesn't feel like any form of stress. It's just literally, there's a lot going on, and that's something new. I'm going to go for it and give it a go, essentially.
Yeah, I really like that, Russell. And I think one of the other things I wrote down as you were talking is self-assess.
Yeah.
And there's a great book out there. It's called The Road Less Stupid, and it talks about thinking time. What a great title for a book, Road Less Stupid.
Yes.
But I'm really curious because I think the leaders, and I will raise my hand and say, "Hi, I'm Doland. I didn't do this. Took me a long time to learn to do this, which is to have the practice of self-assessing,
Yes.
and to do it pragmatically, right? To do it as much as pragmatic as we possibly can, right? As humans, right? So,
And I think that the challenge is, so it's also the understanding that human beings are going to take the easiest path. They're going to take the path of least resistance, or the perceived one. So yes, resilience is about adaptability, openness to change, and actually doing change. So when you build and nurture and grow your resilience, you give yourself more opportunities to take the path of not less resistance, the alternative, the path that actually feels more challenging.
Sure.
And you're not actually seeing it as challenging. You're just understanding this is the right path for me to take at this moment in time. And there's less instance of you turning around and going, "Ooh, that's the scary path." You just go, "No," you're the subconscious is going, "No, this is just the right path to take."
Yeah. How do you, that's a mind, so there's part of leadership is mindset, right? A lot, we're really, what we're talking about is we're delving into that inner recesses of how the brain works. So when you're working with it, that's new to a lot of leaders, right? Because we tend to your point, we are, and in particularly without getting into gender dynamics, but as men, I'm guilty of this. We like a familiar path. I've done this before. I know it worked. Therefore, I'm going to follow this path. And there is it's not, I would say maybe, Russell, not a lack of willingness, but a lack of awareness.
And I think this goes into this wonderful conversation about what on earth is a good leader, because we have so many different messages.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or we have so many examples to choose from, essentially. Right. And then also, what is success is another incredible conversation to have in the world today. There are blueprints and there are examples of what, and so, or anybody that's then going on that leadership journey, or if the first time it's become this thing of like, oh yes, I've suddenly been promoted and I'm this leader manager thingy, and then I'll come along at that earlier stage sometimes with some people and go, so what's your leadership purpose? Because one of the dimensions of resilience is having a purpose, and so they look at you with like, what are you on about? Can I not just go over there and shout at people? And you go, well, good.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. But I think that's a stumper for people. That can stump them, especially when you talk about the purpose or the intention behind what it is that you're doing as leader. Because I think a lot of times, in particularly on that career growth path, right, as you're growing, you were a really good dishwasher, and now we're going to let you cook, and now we're going to make you a chef, and now because you were a really good chef, you're going to run the restaurant.
Yeah,
I'm going to give you all these people, and you're going to go do this. And there is that perception. Well, if I just go tell them what to do and walk away, they should have it. And the goal, and my purpose is to have 10% more profit.
Absolutely. And it's in that moment that I try, different ways to sort of say the same thing, to go, right, every single KPI, statistic, piece of data, spreadsheet that you're looking at now, numbers and things like that, the way my brain works is that I can link those to a behavior. And then, so that's when the leaders, that's when the leaders start to sort of go, and I go, so one of the other things that is when they are ready to hear this, I will say to some leaders, every single thing that's happening across the organization right now is down to your behaviors. So if there's something that's not right, there is an opportunity to shift it by shifting what you do. And then the resilient leader is more open and receptive to hearing that, and it doesn't frighten them so much. It's not about the fact that every piece of responsibility is on their shoulders. It's nothing to do with that. It's just a case of, look, every KPI, every board meeting you go to, every spreadsheet, it's down to a set of behaviors. And if you want those numbers to change, somewhere a behavior has to change, an attitude, a mindset needs to change.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's all interlinked. But my intention about talking about this, go, so there's a solution. There's a way out of this, and the resilient person is more open and receptive and curious about, all right then, let's give it a go. I don't really know what it is yet, and I'll sometimes go, well, neither do I. We haven't got that yet. We need to go work out what it is.
Right.
But if you're willing to work out what it is, it can be different.
Yeah. I love that. It's one of my favorite comments with when I get to talk to executives, even just kind of ad hoc, is just to tell them what you think the problem is not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is something else, and it is how you go find that and uncover that. So one of the things that you just talked about, and I think, boy, this is fortunately there's two sides to this piece of paper. One of the things I love you just said, Russell, is numbers and behaviors, because I think there is a propensity in numbers can create stress, right? Because you're either one of three things is happening, right? You're either not meeting, or exceeding. Yeah. That's how we work our brain, and as a leader, we tend to think that's all of the dimensions I'm looking for, and we don't tend to equate that to a behavior.
No.
We look for, well, why are we not? Okay, let's go higher. And then if sales are down, it must mean that our sales team sucks.
Yes.
Right. That's not behavior. It's just I don't have the right people.
Yeah.
So when you're working with, and I think a component of resilience, and I love your statement around that, Russell, because I think there is that need to look at numbers for what they are and what they really mean.
Yes.
And how do you, and listeners, listen carefully to this. I'm going to ask you an interesting question. How do you help that leader or that person cross that bridge to see, oh, that's what the numbers mean?
So once again, it is, it's not necessarily one single thing.
Yeah.
Then it is in that moment, to actually potentially go back to their strength scope psychometric profile.
Sure.
Sometimes there's an opportunity in there to go, so all of your behaviors, you're energized by certain things.
Right.
And at this moment in time, all of your energizers, which are driving your behaviors, are leading to these numbers, essentially. So sometimes that's a light bulb moment for them to go, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So there needs to be some shifts around that. Then it is really a case of like, it does once again go into the conversation about what's important to you, what's your value system, what do you think your role is here? I keep coming back to you. So what's your purpose?
Right.
And then some of the pennies start to drop essentially around this.
Yeah, and I think that's a good. You also said something just in passing that I think that's maybe we take a moment, kind of spend a couple seconds on, which is you didn't say job, you said role.
Yeah.
There's a difference between the two, between what's your job and what's your role.
Yes.
And I think there's a challenge sometimes understanding that gap. Well, I'm the VP of blah 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 blah. Yeah. Therefore, that's my job, right?
And one of the other, yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that I say to start with, to hopefully make it simplify these leaders' lives, as I go, right, the resilient leader is only responsible for three things. And they sometimes they go, oh, okay, all right, three. And I go, rule of three, you know? And I go, right, you're here to delegate brilliantly to people's strengths and remove the blockages to them performing. So that's what your role is. That's one. The second one is to build and grow and nurture a resilient team or organization against the wheel. And the third thing, to be able to do the first two, is you need to persistently and permanently nurture and develop your own resilience. So you're only responsible for those three things. So if you look at your diary and you see what you've got in front of you on your diary, how many of those things are in those three buckets?
Oh, love that.
And then a lot of leaders go, oh God.
Right. And the answer is none.
Yeah. So then go, so all of your behavior right now,
Excuse me.
bless you. And you're, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So I said, so all of your behaviors right now are giving you the results that you've got. So This is what's in your diary. This is where you're spending your time, you know, and this is what's happening to your good stress and your bad stress levels and feelings of overwhelm and all those types of things. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, where would you like to start? What's the first thing that you would like to do to get more in the space of role modeling those three things? Good. What's going to feel easiest, path of least resistance, for you to start, and how can you harness your strengths for you to take the first step? Because it's about, in all of these things that are going on, all of the demands on their time, we have to support leaders to take what feels like the easiest first step.
Yeah, I love that. That which gives them that kind of that, I don't want to call quick win, but it gives them that ability to see progress and know they can do it. It's funny. It made me smile because I have a rule. I call it the rule of threes. I'm not going to give you any more than three things. Yeah. Because if you come in and you show me a list of 10 things I'm going to tell you, you're going to do nothing. If you show me two, you got a 50-50 shot. So let's get down to no more than three.
And then the question as well. Sorry, is like
I was going to say, of course, as I get older, I can only remember three things at a time. So that's a lot easier. So
no, it is. But it's also that wonderful question of like, so what's your priority right now? And you get 25 answers or 250 answers, and you go, well, I think the dictionary definition of priority is one. I think.
Yeah, something exactly. It is. It is a single digit. The one thing. That's funny. So let's talk a little bit about, if we can, for a couple of minutes. I want to talk a little bit about, so as you know, when you coach clients, there is resiliency that occurs at the top, right? That occurs with the CEO and the whatever that top layer happens to be titled inside of the body of the company, and it changes. How do you help permeate that down through the body of the team? And I know that we've talked about the resilience wheel and kind of where are you in the wheel and VUCA, but I think a lot of times there's this perception, in particular at the board level, I'm going to hire somebody, they're going to coach the CEO, and it's going to fix everything. And it
so So what's your question again? Sorry, in there, Doland?
No, that's all right. I went a long way around the barn on that question. Not a good podcast or host question. So the question is, so how do you help that resilience flow down through the team, right? Because there's that gravity that goes through.
Yeah. So it is, without it, not like selling a framework. It is with the resilience wheel. 7 aspects to it. So it's at a board level to say, so you're a board as a team. So at the heart of resilience is your attitude. So I will ask a lot of questions to go, so what's the attitude of this team? And if I was to go around the table now and ask you, what's the attitude of your organization? Mm-hmm. What would you say? And you'll get an incredible set of answers and conversations and things like that, essentially. And so you are then all the way back to the purpose question. So heart resilience is attitude. You've got, words of purpose, confidence, adaptability, support network, meaning, which is storytelling, and energy, which is strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And how I permeate it through the organization is just like, where are we going to start? We can apply this wheel in all of these different places,
Right.
and we go, right, it's just, you do, as you know, as a consultant, you do diagnostics and go, well, what's the best way we can tease out where you're trying to get to and where are you now? And then
Right.
we use all of the resilience framework to go, okay, these aspects of the wheel, they're in a good place. So how do you maintain those, essentially,
Right.
and get them even better? And then which aspects of the wheel have we collectively got some consensus to go, actually, that part of the wheel is really not in a good place. So the meaning is storytelling. So it's like, if I walked around your organization and, as an alien, and said, what's the stories that are being told around here?
Right.
Then, which is a case of, when your organization deals with adversity, what are the stories afterwards? Are they in the space of,
Great.
in the space of like, that was a challenge, and as a consequence of this, I'm really fed up with, or do you know what? That was blooming hard work. As a result of this, I now have a much clearer idea of what my role is, what my colleagues are here to do to support me,
Right.
and how we're going to get to the next bit. They're two very different stories.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that, because I think that's the it is funny when you talk about that, because it is the secret that goes in the body of the organization.
Yeah.
You kind of go back to, meetings way early in my career, before my hair turned white like it is today, was more the color of your hair almost. But being in meetings, and bringing together collective teams inside of the body of the company, and we have a project, and people that have never met, and then we would, starting with that story, where are we with the story? And and if I had 20 people in the room, I would have 20 different stories. And the focus was always, how do let's get down to, a manageable number of stories, and which helped alignment and focus.
And it's in this space that then I start to say, how optimistic are you? Not positive, how optimistic are you?
Oh, that's great. That's a good question.
Because then it's like, organizationally, or as a leader, or this team, or you personally. So the optimism is grounded in reality. So it's about having emotionally intelligent, compassionate, empathetic coaching conversations.
Yeah.
So that people can all walk into a room that's psychologically safe, and they can go, so can we just be clear that the reality of the size of the challenge is it's enormous, it's massive, and it's really difficult. And you go, yeah, we can talk about it. And it doesn't take people into a spiral of despair. It just takes people into an appropriate place of like, yes, it is. But what's also grounded in reality is all of our strengths, all our experiences, all of our behaviors, what's great about us, what's good about us. And then when you lift that up, people feel hope, and then they feel positive. So no more toxic positivity. My question is like, how optimistic, or how are you going to get to optimistic?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's I do. I love that approach, because I think part of the challenge, I think, with leaders it is to start with the cheerleading.
Yeah.
And I've been in the presence of CEOs across the body of my career, where they felt their number one role was, I'm going to be the cheerleader for the company. And then they would go back and close the office door. I call it the smoke-filled rooms, right?
Yes.
The door would close and it would hermetically seal, and then the CEO would put their head down and go, well, this sucks. There's no way. We're all going to die. How do I don't want to tell them we're all going to die. So,
no, she's saying.
Yeah,
but it's really interesting, because then the optimistic conversation of the leader, CEO, and everybody's got their own way of doing things, is sort of go, okay, so I've been looking into the numbers and the data, and as I'm looking at them, I noticed I've had some really challenging feelings.
Yeah.
And I've just had a chat with a colleague or a friend or a coach or a mentor or whatever, or the dog. And as a consequence of that conversation, I've just had a bit of a realization about how we are going to start to do something about this. That is an incredibly powerful, empowering thing to hear from a leader, in my opinion.
Yes, I would agree with you, Russell, because I think as the leader, then as the team, the team is going to, now I'm peaked. Now I'm leaning forward and I'm leaning in rather than pushing back,
Yeah,
because I
absolutely.
know there may be things that I have that are of value that I can add to this
Yes.
that are going to help us move confidently towards that thing that we're intending to go do.
Yeah, and it's other things like say so. And I've realised that I don't have all the answers, but I've realised I'm just looking across this room of people, and I can see Dolan sitting in the corner, and I am very well aware that he's brilliant at. And so I'm going to come to him next, and I'm going to ask him to help me with this. And I know there are others that here that have got ideas, so I need your contribution. So you are,
Yeah.
it's not a script. It's just a different approach, and all of that is the leader has nurtured their own resilience so that they feel no plug here, so that they feel confident
There you go.
to be able to say that,
Yeah,
and the world isn't going to swallow them up.
yeah. I think that's so important, and I think that gets lost. And I think that's one of the critical things with, and maybe it goes back to kind of where we were in the beginning of the podcast talking about resilience. I think one of the most important factors, and it took me a while in my career to come to understand this, that my resilience depended upon my ability to share the load with people.
Yes, absolutely. Support network is
Yeah,
absolutely is
to
one of the
bring
dimensions.
to
Yeah.
bring them in. And most people, one of my favorite analogies is, and I'm sure this is with you and your wife, and with me and my wife, I don't ever take my wife out on a date. I still date her after 40 years, just so I get permission to come home on the weekends. But, but after that, it's like we don't get in the car and go somewhere hoping that the restaurant is going to suck. We don't. No, we go. The intention is this is going to be a good experience.
Absolutely.
And when you maintain, you have an opportunity to maintain that experience. Nobody goes anywhere hoping that I'm going to go to this conference because the speaker is going to suck.
Yeah. Well, some do.
Well, that's true. I've been to a couple, but anyway, that's another.
I
That goes.
mean, some
There we go.
people's
That's the
mindset
first
is
first
like, yeah,
podcast episode for Leadership with a Pint. Um,
this is it. This is it.
so, so I warned you at the beginning of this that we're going to get to a point, and I'm going to go, yeah, that's long enough. I've kept you for a
This is
long
it.
time
Yeah.
for this
Yeah.
conversation. I
I'll be
want
there.
a couple
I'll
of
be
things. First thing is I think the conversation around resilience and the way you are approaching resilience, I think is brilliant. I think it's incredibly important for an organization. Without a resilient team that can sustain change, you fail. And I mentioned early on, this is your podcast, but there's a math equation that I love to tell executives. A company can only succeed at the velocity at which its people is willing to accept change.
Yeah, totally.
And
Absolutely.
because you just it's a law. It's not my law. Somebody else told me that law years ago. Um, Although I
Which is
claim
brilliant.
that.
Which is brilliant. And for me, when an organization leaders choose then to really investigate this word of resilience, they're going to give themselves the opportunity for people to be able to cope with that velocity of change better.
Yeah, love that. Love that. So we'll combine all this together, and we'll
This is it. This is it.
there's more in there. There you go. We can drop the mic. We're done. So I want to know a couple of things. I want to, I say this in every podcast, that as one of the signs and you leaned into this a little bit when you were talking about, I talked to the dog, I talked to a mentor, I talked to a coach, I talked to leaders. I'll say this again: you cannot do leadership alone.
No.
You cannot be the stoic person. You can't be Sisyphus. You cannot be pushing that rock up the hill every day. Don't do it alone. So I want to take a moment, if you don't mind, and just talk about the kind of clients that you like to work with.
Yes.
Because I warned you that we were going to get here, and because we're not for everybody. But
No.
the kind of clients that you seek, the kind of clients that you're attracted to, that are attracted to you,
Yeah.
and because I want to encourage listeners, reach out to Russell, have the conversation, whether you engage or not. Reach out, have the conversation, learn about the resilience wheel, learn about what it means to be a resilient leader, and take him up on his new intent. But tell a little bit about the kind of clients you work with.
So I suppose people that are listening to this, it's like those that are willing to engage in the conversation. Might be stating the obvious, essentially, but it's like they've had a
Yeah.
listen and go, I'm not sure, or it might still feel frightening or scary, but they're literally willing to sort of give it a go. Because the first second they reach out, you're 95% of the way there, essentially. So, those that are willing to engage in the conversation. And and so it really is thinking about the answer to the question, how are you? So our ideal clients are some that will go,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. I'm all right with some of it, but some of it I'm not. They're ideal clients. Those that go, you know what, it's all fabulous. They're ideal clients because it's like, how are you going to maintain it at fabulous? What are you going to do to make sure it doesn't turn
Yeah.
into something else? And then a significant chunk give the answer of, well, I'm all right if it wasn't for.
Ah.
Yeah. They're the initially really ideal clients. It's like, how are you? It's like, well, I'm all right if it wasn't for ... They're the ones of like, let's just have a conversation. There's no obligation. It's just, let's speak and see if we're a fit for each other, essentially.
Yeah. I love that. It is, isn't it? It really is that. I think a lot of people that there's a lot of coaches and consultants out there, and you cross these folks, Russell, probably as often as I do, that it's buy my stuff. I have a methodology and buy my thing, and if you only do this, blah, 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 I wrote an article, really, the 4 steps to make $1 million. I wish there was only 4 steps.
Yes.
And otherwise I missed most of those steps myself. So, but as we think about that, it really is just about that first step, which is the willingness to have a conversation.
Totally. And then after that, it's like a period of time which we agree and contract for. So the language is like, I'm thinking partner or by your side, or I'm going to support you to get to where you want to get to, so that if something's not quite right now, we're going to tailor my experience to find the bit that's going to work for you,
right?
To do the behavior changes that you know that you need to do. So we'll bridge the gap between knowing and doing.
Yeah.
Essentially around it.
Therein lies the art, right? Between how do you, okay, so now how are we going to integrate this? No, I love that. I think that's a very sound approach. So listeners, I'm gonna encourage you, reach out to Russell and go inside of the show notes. I don't give out links in the podcast because usually people are driving. I don't want you to crash your car. Or wherever you're walking around the park in that moment. But please do take a look at the show notes, reach out to Russell, have that conversation. Your resilience is incredibly important. When you are not, and your resilience is going to ebb and flow.
It is, absolutely, yes.
But how you master being a resilient leader changes lives. That's the secret sauce to creating a sustainable, successful business, is resilience. So, well, as I mentioned, we're starting in with gratitude. So I'm gonna end us with some gratitude. I've really enjoyed the conversation. The conversation's been brilliant.
Thank you.
I've very much enjoyed your insights and helping explain a brand new acronym, VUCA. Even though it's good to be almost 73, and learning new acronyms. I got it. So that's a good day. I can now go use it with my kids and go, I learned a new word today. So. Yes.
Well, there's VUCA and VUCA Prime, so go work those ones. Go.
All right, okay. Thank you. Here I thought I had a victory. Thank you so much for that. All right. So on that note, I want to just thank you for being here, and look forward to maybe subsequent conversations in the future. But I'm grateful to have this conversation. Thank you for helping the leaders Go back and pick parts of you'll see in the show notes some timestamps with some points. Go back and listen to them at 1x. Don't listen to them at 1.25 or 1.5. Go back and listen to them at a speed that your brain can assimilate it properly. So on that note, I'll close the podcast with two things. The very first thing is give the podcast a no, like, share, or follow, or subscribe, or comment. And it has nothing to do with a vanity number. It's not about the number of people on my YouTube channel. It's how the podcast works. There's an algorithm that elevates it to the top. When it's elevated, it becomes visible. When it's visible, it can help someone. They can see it. They can go learn from it, and help fulfill my mission, which is to empower 1 million leaders. So do that. And leaders, as you listen to this, if you learned something today that you heard from Russell, there's a difference between entertainment and integration. Stop the podcast, make a note, take a note about what he talked about, and test it. Try it. And go back to Russell and say, hey, I tried this part of your podcast of what you suggested. Here's the result I got. So turn it from entertainment to action. Change your team. Changing your team creates successful companies, creates lives, does all kinds of wonderful things for other people. So go do that. On that note, I'll wrap us up. So I'm Doland. I'm the host of the podcast. Next Interview Show podcast. We're here every Tuesday morning, Pacific time at 6 a.m. I'm not up that early. It's autopilot. See everybody on next week's episode. Thanks for being here with me.
Thanks for listening to this week's The Next Interview Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and then take time to turn what you heard here into action.